Good evening. Forestry Minister Peter Tapsel says the Dunedin City Council is sitting on a major resource in wood, but needs to be kicked into action to provide employment and export earnings from it. The Minister was in Dunedin today to look at the city's timber industry, the biggest of any local authority in the country. Kim Haring reports.
The legacy of pines left by city fathers is likely to stand Dunedin in good stead sooner or later. About 12,000 hectares of mature trees now stand ready for processing, a city treasure that's often overlooked.
The forest sector here in Dunedin, if it reaches its potential, and I can't tell you it'll do that yet, but if it does, it will provide major employment for the people in this area.
But the Minister was critical that too little's been done to improve the timber before export and of relationships with the Harbour Authority.
What we need to do, of course, is to get away from exporting logs and export built-up processed material.
But he did take a look at one successful Dunedin industry that's adding pre-export value, Atlas Furniture. It's managed to take 9% of the Australian market in colonial-style chairs and is now working on Japan. The Minister had his pick of the chairs to try until he found one that was just right.
The century-old Sentry of Invercargill, its distinctive water tower, had a prime ministerial inspection today. The historic building has been restored and had its cupola reinstated. TY smelter apprentices have worked for months making the steel ribs of the cupola, which has been fashioned from the original plans held at the museum. And the project met with the Prime Minister's approval.
It's good. It's good to have something that isn't wall-to-wall formaker.
The southern skies were noisy this morning with the arrival of 10 RNZAF Strike Master aircraft here for an 8-day stay. The squadron's on an exercise called Falcon's Roost, designed to test its deployment capability. There'll be an open day for the public to see the Strike Masters and inspect the camp on April the 2nd. Two events at Clyde brought the completion of the dam a step closer today. The last generator was lifted into the powerhouse and the sale of surplus construction gear began. The 2-day sale started early this morning and attracted more than 1,000 people. Of those, 500 were registered bidders, and they put up their hands for items as diverse as earmuffs and office buildings. Today's sale turned over almost $100,000, and it's expected tomorrow's offering will bring even more. Doctors should be bringing their skills to families in trouble, and they should be paid for it. That's the view of Canadian family counsellor Professor Ed Bader, who's been in Queenstown for a month helping local doctors and the community. Michael Lynch reports.
In the studio today with me I have Ed Bader. Good morning, Ed.
Good morning again, Michael.
Ed Bader's earning his keep in Queenstown. Brought here by the local Rotary and by local Dr Pat Farry, who saw him in action in Canada, he's flat out. Counselling families in trouble, talking to senior school pupils, play centres, and especially to doctors who see a growing need to sort out society's woes. His theme is families do have the strength to help themselves, but it's up to the professions to let them see that.
One of the things that we have in Canada that perhaps could be copied here is that if a family doctor does spend time with the family doing counseling, he is paid for that in the same way that he's paid for any of the medical procedures that he does. And of course, we have socialized medicine, so that payment for that does not come from the individual family, it comes from government funds.
You're advocating that we have a system like that in New
Well,
Zealand?
I'll tell you, it certainly works a lot better in Canada on this range than it seems to here.
Does the system we have at the moment, the system of payments for GPs, allow for this? You know, are you paid for time for counselling like that?
No, unfortunately it doesn't. And often, of course, the families who are in most need of this sort of counselling often are the ones who can least afford it.
If we don't get a system like that, what can you see happening? If we don't have this counselling available to people? If we don't have an ear to listen to?
Okay. I think the family will probably have to tap its own resources if they don't have outside resources.
What if they have no resources? What if they've
Okay.
exhausted everything? What if they're right down on the pits? Who do they go to?
Okay. Well, here, see, I think, again, you're getting into the whole idea of the helping professions, whether you're talking about the clergy, whether you're dealing with the social workers, whether you're dealing with the physicians, whether you're dealing with the nurses, who are an untapped resource.
Is there expertise out there that isn't being used?
Well, the people here have to look at that question and say, are we providing the resources for our families?
Professor Bader will be taking his message around the south in the few more weeks he's here.
Whatever the stresses and strains of modern living, most of us are still keen to find out how we can live longer. In a few years' time, we may have some clues, thanks to almost 1,000 elderly people in Mosgeil. These over 70s are taking part in a survey which will provide medical researchers with information on the health and well-being of the elderly. Sally Pears reports.
There was no shortage of people to take part in the survey, which will help design a lifestyle formula for the elderly. Mosgeil's over 70s were ready and willing. This is stage 2 of the research. Each day, 4 elderly people sit down to a standard meal. Then they have a series of medical tests and answer a questionnaire covering almost every conceivable topic. Stage 1 looked at falls among the elderly and was published in 1986. The research is so detailed it'll be another 15 months before the results can be used to help prevent problems in old age. And even then, the subjects will be followed for a further 3 to 5 years. Already some interesting points have come out. For instance, more problems are experienced by elderly people who are thin rather than overweight. The research is very costly, and Professor Campbell is grateful for the support the team has received.
It's absolutely essential because it's quite expensive to mount a study like this. So the main support's coming from Medical Research Council, but we've also had support from the Lottery Board and Alcohol Liquor Advisory Council and Sandoz Research Foundation.
And as long as the research continues, there'll be willing participants.
Well, I hope it'll help somebody. That's really why we volunteered to be in it.
Did you have a nice meal?
Very lovely meal. Yes, I'll come tomorrow if they ask me.
A part of Dunedin's history came down today, but its passing went almost unnoticed. And as Kathy Graham reports, it's unlikely anyone who spent a night in the old building would regret its demise.
The bars are about all that's left to give the show away. This was a suburban lockup. The building itself dates back to about 1910, but it obviously hasn't been used for many years. It's been hidden away behind what was the Caversham police station until a few years ago. Demolition contractor Keith Shaw, who's bought the site, is pulling it down to build a home for himself. And he's not at all sentimental about the jail's historic past.
Well, it's been obsolete as a jail for many years now. It's full of aura. And what purpose would it serve?
Do you think there'll be a fuss, though, when people find out it's been pulled down?
I don't care. It's mine. I own it. And if they owned it, they could do what they like with it. I'm not interested in other people. Not a bit.
Are you interested in history?
No. I look forward, never look back. Never look back. You die, that's for dead people.
The police house is to stay. It'll be converted into 2 new flats for the living.
Southland Rugby will have a new provincial-wide club competition this winter. It's part of a drive by Southland administrators to try to get their representative rugby back into the National First Division. Ken Nicholson reports it's a result of an idea which has been voiced in Southland for years.
The need for a provincial-wide competition has been hinted at as far back as the 70s, but now all areas of Southland Rugby have put their strengths together in an attempt to give their top players the hardest possible club competition. Originally, Eastern and Northern teams were reluctant to join forces with the other sub-unions in town, but now the whole province has agreed that something must be done to lift the standards.
The management committee have always argued that to improve the Southland senior team, we would have to provide a stronger club scene so that the players would get better opportunities at a higher level. And until that happens, we feel we will find it difficult to get back to First Division.
One would assume that the major problem is that of travel. It's a long way to go from Takanui to Te Anau, for instance.
Right, that's been debated at length, but with the formula they've got, it'd be a home and away basis. That's one of the requirements. And the other thing is we hope to be able to do something for them with sponsorship money to help.
But the move doesn't mean the traditional sub-union competitions will be lost. The new competition is additional and will not start until mid-season, when the individual areas will have completed their own rounds. It's a move which will benefit Southland Rugby as a whole, and one club which voices this opinion is Bluff, especially keen to do well in its centennial year. Bluff coach John Edmonston feels that the whole province must be behind the move to make it work.
Every week's going to be new. It's different blokes you meet, and it's going to help. It must help.
The end result, of course, that everyone's after is to upgrade the standard here in Southland. Do you think it will help that?
Well, it's too early to say, I suppose, but we've got to try it before we knock it.
So, with the backing of the clubs behind them, the management committee is now in the throes of formulating the fine print for the competition.
Looking good for the future. And now a look at the 3 o'clock temperatures on a rather grey day in the south. And unfortunately we can't bring you all the 3 o'clock temperatures tonight because there's a computer error. I can tell you it was cloudy in Half Moon Bay and 14 degrees. The predicted high for Invercargill tomorrow is 16. And for Dunedin it's 16 degrees. It was sunny in Palmerston today and 17. Partly cloudy in Wanaka and 18. And overcast and 17 degrees in Te Anau. We'll be back tomorrow night for the finale of the South Tonight, as we know it, as of Monday. It's going to be starting on Network 2 at around 8 minutes to 6. The programme tonight should be a very good one. Don't miss it. Good night.